of our session 3 on community engagement. By now, you all know that I'm Elaine Abbott, and I'm here with my colleague Crystal Hitchings. We're with Sunrise County Economic Council, and today we're joined by some really great panelists. We have a wonderful facilitator, Clara Mccool. But because I have somebody whose time is going to be a little limited, and Amanda is now a bad time. I'm just going to start. She's at her other job. So I am going to, in a second here, I'm going to introduce, or Amanda will wave to you, but so I want to introduce Amanda Quinn. She, with funding from the Maine Broadband Coalition, has just recently come on board with us at Sunrise County Economic Council. And Amanda is a broadband booster. And so she will be reaching out to all towns in Washington County to determine the status of your broadband efforts. So your town can expect to hear from her very soon. And Amanda's at her real job right now. But she is a lifelong resident of Washington County. She attends University of Maine at Machias full-time as a business major with a minor in psychology, and she is the mother of 3 beautiful children. So with that, as soon as she's done with that, I'm sure she'll pop in and say hello to everybody, but there's Amanda. So Clara, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi, everybody.
There we go. There's Amanda. So you can expect your town will be hearing from Amanda. Take it away, Clara.
Thanks, Elaine. Morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Clara Mccool. I am the Regional Broadband Associate with the Greater Portland Council of Governments, also known as GBCOG. In my role, I'm supporting a regional broadband effort in the Sebago Lakes region, and I also serve as staffing capacity for the Maine Broadband Coalition. I'm here today to help facilitate this important conversation about community engagement, which is a very crucial element of the community-driven broadband planning process. Before we get started and hear from our panelists, I just wanted to take a moment to get to know the attendance that we have here today. So if you could all just take a minute and put your name, sort of where you're coming from and why you're here today in the chat, that would be great. Sort of while that's happening, I'm going to introduce sort of the group that we have here today. So we have Lisa Hanscom from Roque Bluffs, Jamie Ritter from the Eastern Slopes Region Broadband Coalition, Sarah Strickland from the Greater East Grand Region Economic Council, and Bob Kirkek of Southwestern Waldo County Broadband Coalition. So we're going to start off by hearing from each of these panelists on how they've tackled community engagement in their broadband projects, what worked, what didn't, and sort of any advice they have to those who are just getting started. And then around 11, we're going to open into more of a Q&A session. So we want to hear from all of you on what questions you have about community engagement. And thank you for putting all of these in the chat. All right, so we're going to kick off the conversation with Lisa. Lisa was raised on the family's 6th generation wild blueberry farm in Roque Bluffs, Maine, which today she co-owns with her father and runs the family's wild blueberry business. She worked as Roque Bluffs' first select person for 19 years, and in her last year and a half of her service, she spearheaded the movement to bring high-speed fiber broadband to her community. So she's going to talk a bit about her work in Roque Bluffs and how they secured community buy-in for their project. And go ahead, Lisa.
Good morning, everyone. So yeah, I was a select person for 19 years, and well, let me back up a little bit. So when I spearheaded this was before COVID. I'm going to just say that, of course, some of my issues with broadband was the fact that before COVID, there was really a question of why do we need broadband? I think a lot of us have discovered during the COVID pandemic that broadband is very important to our communities for medical reasons, for doing business, and just for even our students for schooling. But so about 3 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago, as a select person, we started receiving complaints from some of our residents. Not that we hadn't received complaints before, but quite a few about the fact that people were having major problems with the broadband, or not broadband, I should just say internet service. We do not have broadband in Roque Bluffs. Our town is actually split up. We have about 44 houses that actually do get Spectrum, but that's it. The rest of the town gets either through consolidated or sometimes through a satellite or a wireless internet feed. So, and I will have to, truthfully, I will have to say, as a select person, I really did not think we could do anything. I mean, this is one of those issues where we, as a board, would maybe tell our residents, okay, we'll look into it, but I really didn't feel confident that we could do anything. We reached out to Spectrum, we reached out to Consolidated, we reached out to a few of the wireless places, and we were basically told as a board that it did not make business sense, good business sense, to come further into the town of Roque Bluffs. We didn't have enough residents. So we started looking into what would happen if we had our own broadband, our own infrastructure. And I will say that the reason why we actually took that step was because a newspaper article actually just came out about Cranberry Isles putting in their own infrastructure and getting that grant. Calais and Baileyville had just started talking about their broadband, but they were just new. So when we started this, there was very few places for us to look at and to see what other people in the state of Maine were doing. It was kind of a fairly new thing in a way. Believe it or not, that the fact that you guys are all here looking at it, this has happened fairly quickly in like 5 years. It's amazing. I love it, but it's amazing. And so we started talking with Axiom, who had a wireless signal out there. In fact, that's how I actually met Mark from Axiom. And we started talking to him about the possibility of owning our own infrastructure and putting in fiber. Although we also looked at 5G, and being brand new, the whole town, everybody in town, we actually had a big learning curve. None of us really understood fiber. None of us understood 5G. You know, it was all kind of new language to us. But what the select people wanted to do in the town of Roque Bluffs is, and we had a lot of discussions about this, is we wanted to provide good internet to everyone in the town of Roque Bluffs, no matter where they lived, even if it was a mile or 10 miles down a dirt road. We didn't want the same problem that we actually were facing, where depending on where you lived in town, depending on whether or not you got good service. So we really, that was very important to us. I actually visited Cranberry Isle to look at their project. I actually attended a couple of things that Calais and Baileyville were having, little speeches they were having, so that I could hear what their project entailed. And what we decided to do after we gained a little bit of information is we had a public hearing where we invited the town residents to actually come. We told them, you know, these were the complaints we were getting. This is what we discovered. What do you want us to do? Do you want us to continue looking into this project? Do you want us to continue going down this road? And they said yes. It was an informal yes, but we decided, okay, so we kept going. We decided we were going to create a broadband committee at that time. On the committee, we decided we kind of wanted people with kind of different backgrounds from the residents. So we had a gentleman, he's a summer resident, but he's a professor at the University of Arizona that works on the Hubble telescope. We kind of figured he kind of knew the jargon and probably could tell us some information of whether or not we were being like, I hate to say this, but lied to, because I really did not feel confident in the internet jargon and knowing what was right and what wasn't. But he also had some grant writing skills that we thought we could use. We had another gentleman who was actually heavily involved in some of the community groups in town. We thought he would be a great one to be on the committee because he could get information out to people. We had another gentleman in town who does a lot with political groups, so we thought, well, maybe he could definitely be a help in reaching out to legislators and stuff like that. We had just a couple other people who were interested in the project itself. And then there was me and one other select person on the committee. So we did actually put thought of exactly who was going to be on the committee so that we could reach out. We continued actually, as we gained information, we actually continued to have these public hearings, informal public hearings where people would come. And at the end of each hearing, we asked them, do you want us to continue? And they would give us their okay. We actually even asked them, sorry, did someone say something?
Yeah, I just out of curiosity, when you had these public meetings, how many people showed up?
Oh, we were having quite a few, 30 to 40, which is pretty good. I mean, truthfully, they
That's
were
phenomenal.
Yeah, bro. I mean, here's the thing. Now that you brought that up, and I was going to kind of say this at the end, I do think you guys are at a starting point ahead of Rope Bluffs because we did start before COVID. I said this at the beginning. We were having to teach people the difference between fiber, the copper line, 5G. We actually had to do a lot of education on the different types of internet out there and wireless, and why we couldn't go with one and maybe we shouldn't go with one. And even the education of why we needed to have high-speed broadband. I mean, so we were starting from a point where a lot of people thought it wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
I will also say through these public hearings, we were having only the yeses show up. So that is something I want to tell you. We were only having yeses show up. The no's did not actually show up until a couple right before we went out to get the grant, which I will tell you about. And I almost think it's because they didn't really think it was going to happen.
Yeah.
But what we wanted to do as a town is we wanted to make sure that because we had found this grant, we even asked the town people in our hearings, do you want us to actually work on this grant? Do you want us to continue? Knowing, of course, we were going to have to go to a public meeting for a vote. But we also wanted it, so if we decided to go out for this grant and we didn't get it, we were really hoping that the people would vote to actually pay for it themselves to put it in, which they did. They actually did make that vote, not knowing whether or not we were going to get this USDA federal grant or not. So we actually kept having these meetings, but we also wanted to make sure that we were giving them information, like sort of teaching them about the different types of internet and why 5G didn't make sense for the town of Rope Bluffs. I didn't even know that 5G, I knew that like 3G wasn't working at the time. So I didn't figure 4G was going to work or even 5G here, because I couldn't even get 3G to work in Down East Maine, but you actually need fiber to have 5G. Well, if you don't have fiber backbone, then you're not going to have 5G. So it was a matter of actually, and there's a lot of course, articles out there about the internet and what is better and stuff like that. You also have a lot of people who might be summer residents here, and then they're coming with what they think is working, in Maryland or New Jersey, and trying to transplant it here. So we were running into these kind of issues. And like I said, so we would do newsletters that kind of gave them background on internet and sort of like technical information, but we tried to write it in such a way that, it was understandable for everybody. You didn't have to be, like a professor at college to understand it. We did these public hearings. We actually did 6 in a year. I will also say, well, not I, but the town of Roque Bluffs did not do a feasibility study. This is not, our feasibility study was being done as we were kind of researching
Yeah.
whether or not we were doing this or not.
Mhm.
We had a year basically from the time that we started looking at this to come up with an engineer plan and to go out for a grant. So it was a lot of work in 1 year to educate people and to keep having these public hearings. Now, for us, we decided to go with, of course, a fiber based on all the research we had done. We decided that we were going down every road in the town of Roque Bluffs, even the dirt roads, down private associations. And we decided that we were going to own the infrastructure. And then we were going to have a contract with a internet service provider, which we decided at that time was going to be Axiom. And the reason we decided to go with Axiom, we didn't feel like we could be competitive and have more than one because we are a fairly small town. But we did like the idea that we could fire an internet service provider and get another one if we didn't think that person was doing a good job in providing that service once we got this up and built. But we went with them because when Axiom was talking to us, they were on the same page. We had a couple of others that approached us, but they didn't want to build it down those dirt roads. They wanted to keep it along the tarred roads. And that we had made that decision. And when we spoke to the townspeople, that's what they wanted. You know, they didn't want it just down the tarred roads. They wanted it everywhere in the town of Roque Bluffs. So we then ended up, basically I and Philip, the gentleman on our broadband committee from Arizona, we ended up writing the grant for the Connect USDA grant. We ended up getting that. We actually got that after I left as select person. And we also got a grant from Reconnect Maine to help pay for this project. Yes, we did actually. I have someone, the request. I don't think the request for proposals and stuff, it was still, I will say, I think it was still slightly different than what you guys are going to go through. Because remember, this was before people were really doing this. I mean, there were 3 other groups that actually applied for this grant, and they actually did receive it at the same time. But there was very few of us actually looking at doing this. And the only 2 that we really, I mean, there was a couple, but the only 2 that had been making the news was Cranberry Isles and the Calais and Baileyville broadband project. And I mean, Calais and Baileyville were just talking about theirs, and they hadn't even started building, and they were only talking about doing 95% at the time. They have grown to include a couple other communities down that area, and are talking about including more. But I mean, this was really, even though it was only 4.5 years ago, this was really, I would say, at the baby stage of getting local broadband for everybody. So I just want to make sure. So one of the things I also did, so they want us to mention, so we communicated through these public hearings that we had 6 in 1 year. We communicated through these newsletters where we gave them sometimes technical information or information about possible pricing or cost, what it would cost. We also gave them information about what any tax increases might be to them and how would it affect their mill rate and all of that. But I also knocked on doors. I personally knocked on almost every single door in the town of Roque Bluffs, and to talk to them before, and that was right before we went for the vote for the grant issue. So I mean, Sandra was asking, because this did come up, someone sent me an email about summer residents. Those were people that we actually did even though they were not able to vote in our election, we did hold our vote for the broadband at a time when a lot of summer residents were there, May. We actually have a lot of people that come up. That's when they started their summer. So we actually did have, because we wanted them actually to be there too. We felt that they were important to this decision also. So we spent a lot of time. That's also why we had Phil on there too, because he spoke to a lot of the summer residents, had that connection with them. We felt that was important to have their input. And I will say, and like I said, I think you guys are starting from a different point than we did. We did have it was amazing. The second to the last meeting we had, all my yeses stopped coming to those public hearings because they had been coming all along. They thought it was all taken care of. All the no's showed up. And I got torn to pieces. You know, I got yelled at, screamed at. I was told that the selectmen were not, we were not deep thinkers. We did not understand what we were doing. That because the yeses weren't there, that I had been lying about people wanting this, you know. I actually, after that, got emails from other residents in town asking if I wanted them to be at the next public hearing, because we had two in a 2-week period leading up to this vote for our grant. And I said, you know, it would be nice for the no's to see that there are yeses out there. And so they actually came to the next one. I will say the vote for broadband was the biggest group of people we've ever had to come out for an election in the town of Roque Bluffs. We had more people than we have historically ever had. So it was a big decision. It passed though 60 to 24 to not only go out for the grant, but actually to pay for it if we didn't get the grant. So, so yeah, I think our project was a little condensed compared to maybe what some of you guys are doing. But we were in a time crunch because of that grant. I think I covered everything. But there will be a question and answer period too, right?
Yep. Yeah. Thank you so much, Lisa. That was really awesome. And again, yeah, we'll have time for questions towards the end. All right. So next we are going to hear from Jamie Ritter. He's the chair of the Denmark Broadband Committee and is now leading a regional broadband effort of 8 towns in Oxford County called the Eastern Slopes Region Broadband Coalition. So I'll pass it to you, Jamie.
Thanks, Claire. Good morning, everybody. So yeah, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story about how we got to ESRB. ESRB today is about 6,200 homes, 8,500 year-round residents, and that probably somewhere between double and triples over the summertime. 350 square miles, 525 miles of road. There are about 41 people who are on the team at this stage of the game. That list, it goes well beyond those that show up on a regular basis. Those that show up are somewhere in the vicinity of 15 to 20 people, depending on the evening. And we've gone through the process of developing an MOA and have identified by town 8 people who carry the vote. It's not to say that people don't get to ask questions and participate in the discussion, but when it comes down to making a decision as to where the team is going to go, each town has 1 vote in that process, and that is backed up by an MOA. The goal is fiber to the prem, 100 over 100, that is scalable. And how we got there really begins with Denmark in late 2020. We got together with about 7 people in town. Now it's about 8. Process we went through was we went through a boot camp, speed tests, surveys. We were fortunate to get access to Vetro fiber mapping. It's a GIS product. I'm sure you guys have heard about it. If not, we can talk about it in Q&A. We connected in the process with a couple of towns, and that's how Claire and I got to know each other. I jumped in with Harris and Naples and some of the GP-COG activity because Denmark bumps up right next to Cumberland County. We invited in the ISPs to talk about, what do they got? What are they interested in doing for the town of Denmark? And got a similar response that Lisa had. That said, we did have town meetings, and to the question that was asked earlier by Rachel, the attendance was relatively small in spite of the fact that we posted things in town hall, the post office, and the local store. As we talked about this as a group, we were really starting from scratch, and the boot camp was a really helpful process for us as we began to work through what we wanted to do in the town of Denmark. We did a lot of learning from others as well. So the connection with folks like Harrison and Naples and the folks at GP Cogs was very helpful too. So I would suggest that as you guys are doing what you're doing, make sure you're looking outside your four walls, see what others are doing around you, see if there's something there that you can't learn from and take advantage of. As we came into 2021 from the efforts of the team, we ended up in a place where we asked for a town warrant. We asked for money because we wanted to go for a grant for the town of Denmark. The town stood up, said yes, gave us the money. We got the grant from Connect Maine at the beginning of July, end of June of last year. And guess what? As we finished that process, we were told you're too small. So Denmark is a relatively small town, 1,200 people, about 1,200 people in town, 70 miles of road. So a very small piece of this group that we're now part of. What we learned in the process of going through those discussions with the ISPs, Connect Maine and elsewhere, particularly with what was going on with COVID, along with the funding that comes along with that, the rules of the road were kind of changing. So the individual towns weren't going to get as much attention as something that was going to be much larger. So we sat around the table and asked ourselves, where do we want to go? What do we want to do? And how do we get bigger? So obviously, like I said, we were talking with folks in Cumberland County. We also looked around and said to ourselves, well, who else do we interact with on a regular basis? And that's where the school district came about. And so that was MSID 72. And that's really how this group got started. In July of last year, we went to the school board and asked for their support in terms of, do you guys think this is a good idea? And it was a big room. There was, more than 40 people in the room, and they all kind of asked a bunch of different questions and said, yeah, we think that's a pretty good idea. So the next thing we did, we wrote letters to the select boards of each of the towns, asked for their participation, and had our first meeting in August. Since then, in September, we've been meeting twice a month, first or second and fourth Tuesdays or Wednesdays of each month for a couple of hours to get ourselves through this process. The process really at the very beginning wasn't too hard to get started. Everybody knew that broadband was something everybody needed, particularly what everyone's experienced because of COVID. But what we did is we brought the learnings from our effort and basically said, look, let's not talk about a whole bunch of stuff. Let's focus on a couple of key things: speed tests and surveys. And so that's what we did. We very quickly got people to get to their townspeople and communicate with them through various means, which I'll talk about in a moment, about getting speed tests up and running, because some of the towns started, basically with nothing. As we entered that discussion, Denmark had, we had nearly 300 surveys and over 300 locations in the town of Denmark that had done multiple testing during this time frame. So we had to get everybody up to the same place as quickly as we could. We used the help of Connect Maine with their Quick Start grant, gave people in local towns that had not had large committees the opportunity to get a little bit of money so that they could communicate with their townspeople. The process we have been using from a communications perspective is your typical meeting agenda and meeting minutes, postcards, letters, tax in the tax bills, posting of notices in the post office, town hall, and your local key stores. We have open meetings on a monthly basis with folks in the select board. We visited with the select board very early on in this process to make sure that they understood what it was that we had experienced in Denmark and what we were going to try to do from a regional perspective if they were willing to join. We've had an ongoing connection with them through our agendas and meeting minutes. Many of the select board members actually participate in these meetings with us on a bi-weekly basis. The transition as we move from individual town to this larger group gets a little squirrely at times. As you can imagine, having 40 people in a meeting at once can be a little bit challenging as we move forward. Some of the communication to help us with the speed test outside of the meetings was we put signs up around towns. And so we've actually had signs posted in places like Denmark, Lovell, and Sweden. And everybody knows the transfer station in the state of Maine is very important. So we've actually had people go stand at transfer stations and handing out flyers, take ones, and those kinds of things, along with postcards to get the message out. The team very quickly was able, from September of last year to January of this year, to put together a proposal for Connect Maine, ask for a grant, and we achieved the goal of receiving an award in January and February. And we're right now heavy into the process of phase 2 of doing a study in terms of what it is that we have, what our gap is, and how we would close that gap. We put that out 2 weeks ago in the form of an RFP. And from a process perspective, we're waiting for responses. I guess the biggest challenge that we as a team have faced is just really kind of keeping everything focused, make sure that we don't get too far off the field at this stage of the game. There's an awful lot that comes with broadband. But if you're in a process and you're trying to get really 3 key things done, one is get the speed tests, get the data from a survey perspective so you understand what your constituents need, and be able to keep the team focused on going to get a grant. There's an awful lot that can confuse that. And so we work very hard to stay focused on those 3 things. And to date, we've been successful. What are the things that I'm most proud of? I would change the word from proud, but to grateful. I would be very careful about the people you put on your team. Make sure you get the right kind of talent. We have been very successful at that. At times, we've had to dig very, very hard. We've actually had to take people in one town to go to another town and ask family and friends to help out in the process. We're lucky that we have lawyers, selectmen, people who are entrepreneurs, people who have technology backgrounds, prior CFOs, prior business leaders, all on this team, and a bunch of other activities that support this whole effort. So what I would say is make sure that you've got the right people on the team. And as you get into this, make sure you find your influencers, your secret weapons, so that you have yes in front of you as opposed to no's. And by the way, go ahead to nose off. Make sure that you understand what you've got out there. And we're in that process right now where we're actually strategically looking at who are the influencers in town. We're looking at who are the constituents, and it ranges from the local resident all the way up to the legislatures that help support us as a town and as a community as we move forward. So we're not casting the net in a very narrow way. We're working it as broadly as we can so that we make sure that we're in touch with what's coming and also what's happening in the local places. Any questions before I let you guys go? Claire, I just ran out of my 10 minutes.
No worries at all.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Jamie. That was really awesome. I think we'll wait for questions till we go through everyone. But next, we're going to hear from Sarah Strickland. She is with the Greater East Grand Region Economic Council, and she is currently leading a broadband project involving 12 towns. So I'm going to pass it on to Sarah to talk a little bit about how she's addressed community engagement in her work.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see everybody. I wanted to also introduce Angela Cowger, who's on today, and she's our new connectivity booster in the region. So I just wanted to call her out. And I'm not sure who's on here from Mission Broadband because it's a black box, but I wanted to also say that Mission Broadband is a consultant on the project for the East Grand region. So I wanted to make that connection there too. So the Greater East Grand region is a citizen designated, which is really important, economic region that encompasses the extreme ends of Aroostook County, Washington County, and a little blip of Penobscot County, i.e. Drew Plantation. And this economic region was initiated back in 2019. through the vision of citizens who were concerned about the downward trending characteristics of the region. So when you look at the map, it's a group of 12 communities that are connected through their heritage and their and the economic resources and the geographic resources that they're known for. East Grand Lake, all the lakes, the waterways, and the heritage of the forest industry and the tourism and recreation industry, agriculture, but primarily those things. So back in 2019, they initiated some economic development planning, which I was involved with as a consultant. And from that process, over the year of 2019 to the beginning of 2020, there was a recognition that all of the goals and priorities that the economic conversations had all led to broadband. There wasn't any strategy that was prominent that didn't where we didn't need to walk through the broadband door. And so with that recognition, we started intersecting with the conversation about broadband and learning what was going on. And that prompted the Economic Council, which was not an official organization at that point, but it was a citizen-led coalition, I would say. We embarked on finding some money in order to do some broadband planning. And that was, we connected with Connect Maine, and back in 2020 got our first community planning phase 1 grant. I agree with Lisa and others about how this whole process has changed and evolved over the last couple of years. And so what we were able to accomplish in terms of some of the funding has shifted and changed over the course of time. But anyways, this is 12 communities. I went back and looked, and our estimate is it's 176 road miles and 500,000 acres. And a population of about 1,800 overall, and permanent residents that ups to about 5,000 or 6,000, depending on what you're counting in the summer. And so we have been in the process of planning from the grant we received in 2020 through now. And a task force was put together originally in 2020 and really beginning in the fall of 2019. And the purpose of that task force, which was representative of a number of communities, but not all of them. It was mostly key institutions and people who cared a lot about the topic and issue. But that group of 12, I think I was looking back, were the folks that helped guide and create the roadmap for the first part of our effort. And once we received the funding, that group continued, but the planning group got smaller, and there was a group of 4 or 5 people who were really executing against that phase 1 plan. And what that included were the things that were required by the Connect Maine grant. So, and in order to understand what was what with respect to broadband in the region. And so we did a community survey that we created based on resources that I could find on the internet from other surveys that had been done. We initiated updates and conversations through the small community newspaper. We did posters and everything else in order to push the survey out. We worked with the school district to get information out. We worked with Facebook and social media and all the ways that everybody does that, and the town and the town communications, the municipalities. One of the things that we did early on was we made the commitment to send announcements, information directly to people's homes and businesses. So we did first class mail. I mean, it wasn't first class, it was bulk mail, but we made the commitment to do that so that we were confident that the announcement about the speed test or the announcement about taking the survey was actually, we gave it every opportunity for people to do that. I think in hindsight about the survey, we missed a couple of beats in terms of the questions that we asked. When I look back at some of the surveys today that are being used, there were some questions that we overlooked, but overall we got good data that showed some of the spread of opinion about broadband, as well as showed the need that was growing as COVID unfolded. Okay, so we're right in the middle of the whole COVID thing as this is unfolding. We early on, and I guess the way that this was organized, Lisa, you were kind of, and Jamie were kind of the leads, it sounded like. That was my role from a project coordinator perspective. And Dwayne Young, who is the task force chair, was the lead known person across the region and primary spokesperson for the effort. I'm trying to remember, think about where we went from 20 to 2021, and what happened was that if I remember correctly, phase 2 feasibility dollars became available from Connect Maine, and we felt we had sufficiently accomplished the checklist on the phase 1 dollars, and so we went to bat on phase 2 dollars. And what we wanted to do was hire Mission Broadband as the content expert on this, and move forward with a pretty aggressive planning budget in order to push us right through to being able to apply for infrastructure grants. Well, Connect Maine didn't see our application quite the same way we did, so they decided they offered some money, but it wasn't really enough, and so we put a pause on our application to them and said, okay, we're going to take the small amount of dollars that we have left, and we're going to complete some of the tasks that we had not done. And so that was when we moved forward with talking to all the providers. We retained Mission Broadband in order to help us move through that process with knowledge and expertise. The task force at that time was small. So we made a very strategic choice here, which may prove to bite us in the butt. I have no idea, but we're going to find out tonight, because we made the decision to keep moving rapidly through the feasibility planning process and go all the way to RFP in order to be able to understand what it actually was going to cost to potentially build out this whole region. Because we felt like in conversations with the town leaders and with some of the towns, and in some cases, the lack of engagement by people was all surrounding the question, either we don't need it, or we don't know what this is going to cost. So what is it going to cost to do this? And so we made the call together with Mission Broadband to say, we're going to do all of this additional planning work, and we're going to move to RFP, which is what we did. We were lucky enough to be a part of the VetroCare, one of the second VetroCare cohorts. We went for that, and that was helpful to us. Although I will say that VetroCare mapping does have its own it's not perfect, right? So it's better than the mapping that was available, obviously through Connect Maine and the FCC, but it does have its drawbacks. Regardless, we kept compiling as much data as we could and use that data in the RFP. So, and throughout this process, we were communicating, again, updates to towns through letters and emails and packets of information that we felt were appropriate without overwhelming people. And we kept the community involved or connected, I would say, through updates to their houses and the internet. So where we're poised right now is the small task force all along has understood that it needs to put a pause on the work that we've done and come back around to the towns and invite their involvement and engagement from this point forward. And so tonight, we are having the first of what will be a series of meetings with the 12 towns in order to bring them to where we are in terms of the planning process, to introduce the goals that the regional effort has held through the RFP process, and to provide the towns a set of questions and discussion topics that they individually need to have in order to be able to make a decision about their involvement in the regional effort and whether they want to be or not. And so I'm happy to talk more about that. We're actually let's see, where can I go next? We have a very good turnout tonight. There is, I think, every town will be represented. Some of the towns are unorganized territories, so we have that issue, or it's not an issue, it's just a reality about who we're going. But the major municipalities, from the last count, everyone will be represented, and the select board members will be there. So this is the beginning of a really important and fraught with all kinds of issues. It's really helpful for me to hear James and Lisa's reality check as we jump into this stage. People didn't share this, but, or at least I'm curious about it. I can't remember from the newspaper articles, but the Greater East Grand Region, the RFP replies that we got based on the providers, and it's all apples and oranges and lemons and avocados in terms of what we got back, but regardless of the guidelines. But the information that we've received so far, and there's some outstanding information, anywhere, it's going to cost anywhere between $3.5 and $17 million in order to service this particular region. So there's a lot of work ahead of us, and for these towns to sort through all of that information and the choices that they have. I'll finish. What we decided was really important. There were several guidelines that Dwayne and I have held. And one is, we will, no matter what a town tells us at any particular point in the process, up to the very end, if they say they do not want to be involved going forward, we will come back and give them another opportunity to be involved based on what is finally decided. So we want to make sure that there is no that every town is given every opportunity as it grows its own knowledge and conversation about this along the next 6 to 9 months, which is what we are planning on for this process to take. And the other part is, because this is a citizen designated region, we're also making it perfectly clear that those communities that, for example, are in Aroostook County, which has an effort going on, a really good effort, solid effort going on, that may be a better approach for those towns to attach to than this. It may be better for them in terms of what's possible, and that's okay. So our goal is to not be prescriptive at this point, but to bring forward all the really solid work that's been done in an effort to help the towns make their local decisions. And then we'll move on as a region from there. Our end goal is that we would like to be ready to go to infrastructure. We would like to have the business and finance models and understand what ultimately the regional design is going to be by the fall, and so that we're positioned to in order to be able to access funds, federal and state funds in the first part of 2023, understanding that we'll have warrant meetings, we'll have town votes and warrant meetings and MOUs and all of that to navigate through. I'll put a pause there. I think I probably went over 10 minutes. I'm sorry, Claire.
No worries at all. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was really, really useful information. I think the last person that we have is Bob Kurek. So we'll go to him, and then again, we'll have sort of almost an hour for a little Q&A. So Bob is a retired corporate CPA. He's the chair of the Palermo Select Board and the chair of Southwestern Waldo County Broadband Coalition, which is another regional broadband project consisting of 5 towns. So I'm going to pass it over to Bob to talk a little bit about his work on community engagement in that effort.
Great, thank you, Clara. And I guess what I can say is that this whole thing started for us. Well, I guess it started for me early on. I, as a selectman, I had in my goal list to bring better broadband to our town. But that's about all it was just a goal that kind of sat there for a couple of years and didn't move anywhere. Then in April of August of 2020, I got a letter from Elaine Higgins, who's a select person in Freedom, and says, hey, how about anybody on the select boards want to get together and talk about maybe bringing better internet into our area? And so I thought, well, what the heck, it meets my goals, and maybe I could work with some other people. So Elaine's note initially went to Palermo and Montville, Knox, and of course she's with Freedom. And what wound up happening is we wound up bringing people in from Palermo, Freedom, Montville, Liberty, and then Searsmont joined our group as the year went forward. Our town sizes, we're not big towns. Palermo is the largest town. We have 1,570 people. And the other towns are similar to ours. Some are a lot smaller, but we're all kind of in the same boat. If you look at the total population is about 5,600 people. We have possible, they call them passes. How many people could you sign up if you got the internet going and everybody took it? That'd be about 3,334. And we have 344 miles of road. So I think we're a very rural area, for the most part, either underserved or unserved. Spectrum has some internet service coming through Palermo along the Route 3 corridor. So we started out by pulling from the select boards. We asked the 5 towns to each put on their donation list for their town meeting $500 that we could use to get the ball rolling, and to nominate a person from the select board, either a selectman or someone in the town that they trusted to work with us, to come and join and form a 5-person board. So what is the Southwestern Waldo County Broadband Coalition? We're an unincorporated nonprofit association. So we're kind of like the Thursday night quilting club at the library. We have no legal nexus right now. We got the $500 from each town, and we worked with KVCOG, Kennebec Valley Council of Governments, to be our fiscal sponsor, because we didn't have any legal standing. We used KVCOG as a sponsor. And so they took the money and they distribute the money for us, and they get a fee for their work too. So at about the time we got the towns to send their $500 checks, we also got a phase 1 planning grant for Connect Maine, and we started working along, working pretty hard. And I think community involvement is, I don't know what isn't community involvement. You know, it's almost everything you do. So I'm gonna start out and say that the biggest piece of community involvement for us was probably the survey that we did. And how did we get that survey going? Clara, if you can help me by putting on the screen some of the things I sent you, and then I'll talk about those each individually real quick.
Did you want to start with
Here
the
we go.
survey results, or?
Well, we can start with that. This is fine too. So what we have here is our web page, and we're lucky enough to have people who knew what they were doing to build web pages and all of that. And we started our community survey early April, and we ended it in early September. And we got a total of 630 responses, which represents about 20%, which I thought was a pretty darn good response rate. So if you just kind of flip up through those, you can see that some of the charts, we've got if you looked at Palermo, which is my town, with 22% response rate, Liberty 22. So everybody seemed to be about the same in response rates. And then, I don't know, we don't need to go through the whole survey, but it is there for you to look at if you want to, if anyone wants to go on our webpage, which is SW Waldo Broadband Coalition. I'm sorry, broadband.org. So, you can just kind of see, most of our towns are, people who live by the, live with themselves, and the survey just goes on and on. So, but it did let us know for sure that the towns were really involved in wanting, the people in the towns were really involved in wanting broadband. One of our other presenters today talked about having a lot of yeses, and I think the people who respond to your survey are generally people who are in the yes category. Yes, I want it. Yes, I want it. So there were a few people who were no's, but most of the people who came about were yes people. Does it affect you if you don't have internet? Some people say yes, some people say no. That was about 50-50. and different things like that. So I think that brought in more people than anybody else. If you could click on the news, Clara, and we'll just go up to what we have in our news and click on the February newsletter. We're trying to pull together newsletters each month. And this is one way another way we communicate with the people and let them know what's going on. In addition to this information, in my town, we do a quarterly newsletter. And so when we write up the quarterly newsletter, we take excerpts from our SWCBC newsletter so that people can see where we're going, what we're doing, and hopefully where we think we're going to go from here. I mentioned, I talked a little, so if you'll go into the flyers that we sent out now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on each of these things. People can look at it on their own. But if we start out with the mailer, do you have the mailer there? Oh, so I'll use it.
I have this one.
Sure. Okay, let me just talk about them, and I can talk about them out of sequence. So this was a mailer that we sent out to the towns, to all our residents towards the end of our survey, because we had about a 20% survey, and we wanted to try to encourage a little bit, people coming in a little bit more. Throughout this whole process, I learned more about EDDM, every door direct mail, and QR codes. I learned more than I thought I ever wanted to learn. But, I'm just trying to give you some examples of some of the things we did. So if you want to go to another one, I'll talk about that. So this is one of my favorites, Wicked Bad Internet. Are you paying too much for slow service? Does it work all the time? Is uploading anything a nightmare? If your kids are online, can you watch a movie? If you answered yes to any of those questions, come see us. You can see the SW Waldo broadband.org, our websites there. I especially like the snail too, with I guess that's an Ethernet connection. But anyhow, I'm just trying to give you examples of, we try to talk about the benefits, how we could help, what we're trying to do, that sort of thing. And then again, there's a QR code, though. Those are pretty slick. You can put, if you've got a modern phone, you can put it up to there, turn on your camera, and it'll bring you right to our website. So if you want to put up another one, I'll talk about that. So that was a poster that we put up in our town offices, the libraries, and places where people would come.
I have the mailer and the handout.
Yeah. Are they coming up?
Are either of them available on the website? It's just prompting me to put in a login.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So I'll just talk about them then. So we developed a mail. Sure. So we developed a mailer, initial mailer to send out to everybody. Again, that was a every door direct mail experience. And when you're working with 5 towns, you're working with 5 different post offices and stuff like that to try to get this information out. And at the same time, we developed a poster that we put in the town offices and things like that. So we pushed really hard to get people focused on our survey. In the meantime, once we got the survey up and running, we were focused on the ARPA funds that are coming in. And we petitioned with our Waldo County commissioners to try to get some of the ARPA funds so that we could use it for broadband. And it was a hard battle. You know, we brought with us our state senator, our state representative at one of the meetings. We've had people from Island Institute come and talk with them to give more information. And we pushed really hard. Our commissioners had, I think, for the most part, already decided how they wanted to spend the money. So, but our efforts did yield some fruit, and our commissioners decided to send $20,000 to each town in Waldo County out of their ARPA funds. And so that $20,000 then went to each town and gave us the ability to go to the towns and ask them, can you send $9,000 to KV Cog on our behalf so that we can get a feasibility study going? So that's how we funded the feasibility study. And boy, I'm jumping all over the place, aren't I? So we're right now, where are we right now? We're in the process of, within weeks, the feasibility study should be done for us. But, and that will give us a better idea of costs and, you know, what we really need to ask the towns for money. We're also in the middle of trying to figure out how do we form ourselves into a more legal type entity. So we have an interlocal agreement that was used by Midcoast in their efforts. We're working with that. We've determined which attorneys we want to work with going forward. We will form a corporation to get grants from Connect Maine. You have to have 4 towns in a what they call it, a broadband utility district. And I think that's the way we're going to go, but we're still looking for the information from the feasibility study to focus us in on how we're finally going to get where we want to go. And we've got 4 possibilities that we're looking at. We're looking at forming a utility and running it as a utility, as us owning it. We're looking at a partial ownership and a partnership with a IS internet service provider. We're looking at what would an internet service provider do if they could come in and do everything in our towns. And then we're looking at Red Zone, because most recently Red Zone came out with some exciting new technology, but it's unproven right now. So we'll have to see where we go from there. I'm just trying to think. So we talked a little bit about how we shared updates on our projects. We communicate with the residents. Oh, I got to tell you, I told you some of the good things that we do. I got to tell you one of my failures. So the other couple nights ago, we had a public hearing about joining with our neighbor Liberty for their ambulance service. And I thought, boy, that's a perfect time to have a captured audience. I can spend a few minutes and go through our broadband pitch with them. And, you know, so first we went through the ambulance information, and then they had just gotten a new used ambulance, and they had it parked out in front of, we did this at the library. They had it parked out in the front of the library. And once they turned the lights on, flashing lights on, I lost my audience. So I didn't get to do much there. But, you know, you just got to keep trying, you just got to keep pushing, and you know, eventually we'll get there. We've talked, I think, with every town in our coalition, and I know on my 52nd wedding anniversary, I was in Montville talking with Montville, so my wife was really happy with that. And you know, we keep moving along. our biggest challenge, I think, when you have a 5 or 12 town coalition, it's kind of like herding cats. You want to make sure everybody's on the same page. I think the biggest challenge, though, is how can we get some of the ARPA funds committed to our project? Because a lot of the grants that we'll be able to get, some of them will have to have town contributions or coalition contributions. So if we can get some sizable money from the towns, from the ARPA funds, then we'll have some leverage in how we go after grants and what grants we can get to get us started and that sort of thing. And I forgot to mention, when we started this whole thing, we said our goal was to bring reliable, affordable broadband to all our residents. And within that, the idea was that we did not want to affect the tax structure of any of the towns. And because we didn't want to affect the tax structure, we knew this money was coming from the federal government. We really pushed the idea, let's use the federal funds to push our broadband project forward and not affect the tax base of each of the towns. So I'll stop there, and then we can go into the question and answer session if you wish.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. That was awesome. Thank you everyone for this great information. So now we're going to move into a Q&A session. You can feel free to use the chat, put your questions in there, or you can use the raise hand feature. And we're going to start with, we got a couple questions during the presentations. So I'm going to start with those. So our first question is coming from Debbie Pride. And she is asking Jamie about Vetro mapping and how they can get it.
So I'm going to send that right back to you, Claire, because it came through you guys first time around, right? I guess the point that I was making before between, talking to legislators at the state level, all the way down to your town residents, there's a whole myriad of people who are out there. And we've been trying to get to anybody and everybody that's involved in this. And fortunately, we got an invitation to join Vetro through Connect Maine. So Connect Maine is one of those groups that you guys have already heard about, but they were the ones that have gotten us in, and we're now in the second time. We did Denmark by itself, and we found it helpful. Yes, Sarah, it is a little tricky for sure, and you need somebody who really wants to understand it. Don't go and jump in and not be prepared to really staff it. If you can't staff it, don't do it, because you're just it's heavy. So great tool, but you got to be prepared to support it.
I agree, Jim. I think that the way to get involved is, with that caveat, is to, Vetro Cares has cohorts that they start, at least they still are doing it, which allows projects, towns or regional projects, to apply to become part of that cohort, and the service, they provide a certain amount of services for free.
Yeah, so we're in the middle of that right now.
Yeah.
Second time around.
Yeah.
And the only way it really works is you got to have somebody who's going to be there every other week.
Yeah.
Hands on.
And I think with the thing we learned in hands-on and then bringing the data back to a couple of towns to verify was that the initial download of rooftops that are used for the baseline of the data, it's about an 80-20 rule. I mean, there's about 15 to 20% of noise in that data. At least that was our experience. So it's it's so much better than anything else. And that was the noise factor that we found in a couple of the towns that we were looking at.
Yeah, you can't just take it for face value.
No, you can. And
you gotta double
but
check.
if you understand that there's a margin of error in it, then we did use it and use some of that data, that those KMZ files, to go to RFP. So it really is a matter of how much time, to James's point, that you put in for to increase the accuracy of that mapping and those cost estimates. So.
Yep. Yeah, and I can follow up again in sort of a follow-up email with some Vetro information and how to get to their website, and some more context for some of the Vetro Cares programs, if that's something people are interested in. Okay, our next question that we got was from Sandra Fortin. And I think this is sort of a question that can be applied to all of the panelists. So she was asking how many public outreach sessions were offered virtually, which towns are using virtual meetings / selectmen, and what are sort of the pros and cons of having those meetings being virtual.
I can speak real quick for Rogue Bluffs. Of course, this was done before Zoom, so there were no virtual meetings for us. And the internet is so bad at the town hall that we did not even have a web page. So listening to everybody else who I guess has the websites and all of that, that is not something that the town of Rogue Bluffs was able to do. So none of our outreach was done virtually or over social media or through websites or even emails, because it's just not possible in the town of Rogue Bluffs.
Yeah, and Jamie, I know you've been having your meetings virtually. How has that experience been?
It's been great. I mean, we started off with the smaller team, the Denmark team, in person, and then it very quickly went virtual. We've had to go back and write rules about the Denmark virtual meeting process. So we do a combined virtual and in person to be able to do that. And then from a total regional team basis, we were doing some face-to-face last summer as things were kind of settled with COVID. But as it kicked back up, we went to remote and have stayed remote at this stage and been successful at it.
Yeah, and Sarah and Bob, have you also been holding your meetings virtually?
We have, the small task force has been meeting virtually. Yeah,
I,
nonstop. But tonight's in person. We're moving to in person for the larger town meetings.
and for us, you know, the Broadband Coalition holds its meetings as Zoom meetings. And up until recently, I had to drive to the town office to be able to participate in those meetings because I have such a poor connection here at my home. And that's worked well. And because we're not a legal entity, we didn't have to have special rules about how we would do this or how we would do that. And you know, we're making it work. And I think when you have 5 towns and they're dispersed, it makes it a lot easier to get people together and to talk about the things that need to be talked about. And our meetings are all the 2 meetings a month. Like Jamie, we meet the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of each month, and our meetings are open to whomever wants to come. So
Yeah.
we do.
Yeah, I've definitely found having them virtual allows you to bring in some other individuals from different parts of the state who might have some expertise, which has been useful in the broadband committees that I've worked with. Okay, I'm seeing a question from Ben Levesque that Lisa volunteered to sort of address. So he's asking, Are seasonal residents generally supportive of broadband expansion? And if so, what is the strategy for outreach and commitment?
Yeah, I was willing, because this was actually a concern that we had, because we do have a number of seasonal residents, whether or not they would be supportive, because of course, this was before COVID, there were no opera funds. This might affect, even if we went out and got this grant, we were going to have a little bit of a percentage that we were going to have to cover. So there was a tax base question, you know, how much was this going to increase our taxes and our mill rate? So it was kind of a mixed bag. And I think each town that has a huge seasonal population, I think you'll find it's different. For the most part, our summer residents were very, very supportive. One of the questions that had come up that I had gotten emails from, I guess, the previous one is our how we did our pricing. I think each town should look at it separately and determine how their summer residents, but we did a lot of talking with them. We actually just came up with a program so that they didn't have to pay for the full year. They could just pay for the amount that they were there, like 6 months or less than 6 months. Having said that, I will say we did have some of those comments that I had mentioned in my presentation about the select board wasn't really deep with deep thinkers. We didn't understand what we were talking about, and we didn't understand the process, came from our summer residents. There were a few that had sent around emails because they were here during the summer. They didn't see the need to have high-speed internet. They had it where they came from, but they didn't see the need for it here in Roque Bluffs. They also had 5G where they came from, thought we could do 5G in Roque Bluffs. You know, so we had some of that kind of thing that we had to work through. Because some of these people actually do carry some weight with people, because I think there's this whole thing that they come from away, so they must know what they're talking about. You know, they work in these governments. So we had to work kind of through that, and we did it basically by doing our own research. Like, why does wireless not work in Roque Bluffs? Well, we have mountains. It doesn't work now. You know, you can already tell it's not working. We have mountains. We have trees that's blocking the you know, the signal. Why is the cable not working? Because we're at the end of the line and it's getting clogged down by the time it gets to us. You know, why is satellite not working? Because it's extremely expensive, you know, that kind of thing, to why we needed to do fiber. Also, you know, we, you know, going through the process, a lot of us thought we wouldn't actually qualify for this grant we were going out for that we got. And my thing that I told everyone, what does it hurt to go out for the grant? If we don't qualify, then they'll tell us we don't qualify. If we qualify and we get it, then we're lucky, we got it. So that's what we did. I feel weird because this was, like I said, before COVID. We did not spend a lot of money. The only money we actually spent is on the newsletters and stuff that we sent out. Everything was kind of done on the cheap. We worked, and I wanted to mention, we worked with Island Institute. I think it's very important to have someone that can keep you organized. It's been mentioned a couple of times, keep you on track with deadlines, make sure you don't get bogged down in all the details and you get stuck there. But I think it's just, even with the seasonal residents, it's just a matter of plugging ahead, definitely getting those yeses that were coming to maybe speak to their neighbors, but not letting the no stop you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think
No,
that's a kind of a natural segue into the next question. That's in the chat. Nice job, Lisa.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. That's actually really perfect. So we have a question from Sandra Fortin, sort of asking what were some of the strongest selling points that changed the minds of the no's. So people who maybe transitioned from being not as excited about broadband coming into being more in the yes category. And this is for anyone who's dealt with this. So Jamie, Sarah, and Bob, feel free to chime in if you have examples too.
Well, if I could, I would say that there are some no's you're never going to be able to change. You know, the guy that refuses to get that only has a flip phone and says that why the heck do I need this stuff? And you can tell you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You know, you could tell them that, hey, look, if you know, as we get this set up, as we get you in, instead of having to go to the doctor every day, or not every day, but during a snowstorm or whenever it's inconvenient, if you need to go to the doctor, we can get to the point where we have good telemedicine here, and you don't have to go in every time. You know, when your kids come and visit and they say, how come we can't get anything here? You know, you've got that problem. When an older person has been isolated for a while from their family, they could get on a Zoom call, you know, a FaceTime call, and at least break some of that loneliness. So there's a lot of good reasons why you want to use it, but I think COVID took care of a lot of the no's for us, and I don't mean by getting rid of them. I mean by them seeing the problems that their children had and they had when their children were trying to do homework, they were trying to do work from home at the same time, and that sort of thing, and you know, their internet bogged down. So I think the real life experience and the idea that this is a fundamental tool that we should all have. It's a fundamental economic tool for our communities. They see the benefit of it.
Yeah, I'd like to add, COVID definitely changed a lot of no's to yeses, I think, although there are still no's. I will tell you, for us, it didn't change the no's for the vote, for the to vote to go out for the grant or to get the taxes. What changed the no's afterwards is because it still hasn't been built yet, but we sent out after we got the grant and everything and said we can make the drop to your house free of charge, but you have to take it in the build out section. You know, if you wait 2 years, you'll have to pay for it if you decide to get it. All of a sudden, a lot of the no's decided to sign up for it because it was free to their house, even if they lived a mile down the road. So in some ways, it was that changed their mind, not before the fact, but I guess they figured if we were getting it and it was free to get it to their house now, they'll take it. So
I think that's such an important one, Lisa, that I made a note of. I think the other one from we've talked about economic development issues, but I think one of the real important ones for this area is people really are concerned about, I think everywhere, about young people moving out, you know, not having opportunity, but not having and not having access to broadband even limits that more. It completely changes it by having high-speed internet. There could be a greater chance of keeping young people interested in staying in the area. I don't know whether I can share my screen. I'm going to just try that now. If you give me the can you give me the host for a sec? I just want to show people this graph that I found the other day. Is that easy to do or hard to do for somebody? Is it done?
Yep, good to go.
Good to go. So this was in a resource online from 2018. Can you guys see it? Likelihood of relocation for broadband. I found this fascinating. So the 18 to 34-year-olds, you know, definitely the very likely is 60% of this sample. And this was a smaller town, a smaller community out west. But nonetheless, I would bet a lot of money that this would hold true. And I think the other part that's really important is the in-migration to Maine. And especially in our neck of the woods and everybody else is on this call, those population cohorts of, the 35 to 55 and the 55 to 64, those are folks who typically have some economic well-being for our community. So anyways.
Sarah, I just wanted to mention one of the things, when I was interviewed after getting this grant and stuff, that I was asked is about how did I see this changing the town of Road Bluffs in 5 years? And I said, I wasn't thinking 5 years down the road. At the time, my grandson was 2. So it was 2 years ago. And I said, I'm thinking 20 years down the road. I want him to stay on the farm, but I don't want him to be a dirt poor farmer. I want him to be able to work from home, make a good living, and still work the farm and live there. So I was looking 20 years down the road, not just 5.
Yep. That's great, Lisa. Yeah.
I think one of the near-term things that I know we've heard in Denmark is people can't sell their homes.
Yeah.
Don't have internet, can't sell your homes. And then people who are literally 2 doors down from me, the day they moved in, or the week that they moved in, I went over to say, hey, how you doing? And they're like, what do you do for internet? And it was a funny conversation because of what I'm doing in Denmark, but they didn't realize that it's not ubiquitous.
Yep.
And all of a sudden it was like, well, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So there's you get the picture.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point. And Sarah, if you could share that graph with us, we can share it with the rest of the group, because I think that's really cool.
I'll send the article that it came, so there's context to it too. So it's not just random.
And Sarah, I would bet that graph changed dramatically because it was 2018.
Oh, Bob,
and
totally.
COVID happened after 2018.
Yeah, you're right, Bob. You're right.
Lane, raise your hand.
And as far as selling houses,
I think you might have.
Bob froze. He needs better internet.
Yeah, that's why we need better. If I can jump in for a second at this time, just because it's just a natural a movement into what I was going to say at the end of this session, is that SEEC can help Washington County towns with broadband surveys at no cost to you. We have some communities that are already undertaking these. And Crystal, I can't type and talk at the same time. So if you can put in my email address in the chat, we certainly can do that and are happy to do it. And the SCEC has already released a young adult or youth broadband survey. We did it in collaboration with Healthy Acadia, and every school principal in Washington County was sent a link to that young adult broadband survey. And we're going to be sharing the results with that. But to Sarah's point, and what that graph is showing is, it's astounding that the young people don't want to stay, and the reasons why. And if they had reliable internet, the things that they would want to do to stay here to do. It's very revealing. We're keeping that survey open, I believe, till about just before April vacation. And so and even to that extent, when we're talking about education being a big selling point, some of the respondents, some of these young adults, they seem to be averaging 14, 15, 16, 17, right in there, middle to high school. And that some of them want to stay in touch over with SCEC due to broadband. And so when they were asked to put in their email address or how we would contact them, they don't have internet at home. And so I need to send things to them snail mail. so that they can stay in touch with what SEEC is doing, or what communities are doing for broadband. So that child goes home and can't do their homework online because they
Yeah.
don't have it. So
That-
I just wanted to make that offer to Washington County towns. Crystal, thank you for dropping my email in the chat there. You can certainly reach out. And as I said, we've got some communities that are already undertaking those surveys, and we do have funding for that. So it's at no cost to your community, but it is Washington County only. Right, Crystal?
So, so Elaine, it's so funny about I don't think in a way that you have to make a case for broadband for the youth.
No.
They're already there. My pre-K grandson, the way he watches TV is streaming.
Yeah.
He streams his TV. He's already got an iPad. That's what he uses. He knows how to use it. They have tablets and iPads in school. Every kid, like even in Rose and Gaffney at least, and I think most of the kids now because of COVID have computers. Of course, this has been happening for years, and this was my argument. It's just because you give a kid a computer does not mean they can do their homework when they go home because they don't have internet service. And it was hard to get teachers to understand that my daughter wasn't doing her homework because she had no internet service, that we couldn't do that kind of stuff. So I don't think the selling of broadband is in a way for the youth. We hear a lot of young people with kids want to move into Road Bluffs, but they can't because there's no broadband. They want to work from home, but they can't. There's no broadband, so they just resell. They don't stay long.
Yeah.
I do think it was that middle-aged people that have been moving in or still live here that needed to be convinced. Why did we need broadband? Why did it have to be here? Like I said, there was a lot of summer residents that they had it where they came from. They were up here to rest. They didn't think they needed internet, or at least fast internet. They didn't care because they were here to rest and to relax. And they went out, boating and hiking and all that stuff you do in the summer when you're on vacation, basically. And then there was a lot of locals we had to convince because we have lived so long with no fast internet. Why did we really need it? I mean, the number of times I complained during a college class because I got kicked out of my test. In a way, I thought I was all by myself and I couldn't do anything about it. So, I mean, I do think there's a big change, but, and I think after COVID, COVID has been a big seller for having broadband in Washington County and rural Maine.
Lisa, I'd like to just add something. When we did our survey, one of the questions we asked the summer residents who took our survey was, if you had better internet, would you stay longer? Instead of maybe being here a month or 3 weeks or whatever it was, would you stay longer? And we got a positive response on that question. They would.
I think it really depends on the town. I think each town, I'm learning this in my EMA job. I think each town in the state of Maine has their own personal thing. And I think you have to work with your summer residents. I had a positive response from a lot of my summer residents, but I still had that pocket of summer residents that really, they were here to rest. They were here for the summer months, 5 months. They really didn't see why they needed to increase their internet speed and why they would want to and pay extra money in their property taxes for it.
Yeah, and we've sort of addressed parts of this next question a little, but for all of the panelists, have any of your groups engaged youth in outreach in this process? And then on the flip side, how have you engaged seniors as a targeted population, and what have been the pros and cons of that?
So we early on it would have been in 2020, I had retained a local woman to help do some of the work on the ground in the community, and she engaged her, I think, 11 or 12-year-old son maybe, and he would do little mini YouTube videos on taking the survey and why it was important. And they were quite a hit. And, you know, and he was great. But that was one of the ways that we tried to up the both the entertainment value and this is really important. And he did a great job.
So for us, we're fortunate we have Freiburg Academy inside our four walls of the 8 towns. And so because of what Vetro requires in terms of diligence and the willingness to learn what GIS is, we've reached out to the school, and the school has agreed to let us solicit students for work inside Vetro. We have begun to have those conversations with them. We'll see how that goes over time. We'll let Clara know how that goes as we move forward. It's a little bit of a struggle as we start because it's not quite what they would expect at this stage of the game, but we're looking to use them not only to do the work in the Vetro, but also to use them back in their local towns to help spread the word. A little bit around, who's a key influencer and getting the message out. I look around this group of people. There's plenty of us that are on here that are old enough to remember going home and telling mom and dad not to smoke. And so it's that kind of support as we push things forward, taking it through the school district and getting it back to mom and dad that way through the students.
Yeah, and for the town of Roblas, we didn't formally engage the youth, but at our meeting where we were doing our vote, we actually had a high schooler stand up and give a very passionate speech about why they should vote to get broadband, to go out for the grant, but if that we didn't receive the grant, to vote to actually take out the money and pay for it themselves. I do think youth should probably be involved, maybe even actually on your broadband committee.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And the work that I'm supporting in the Sligo Lakes region, we actually have just started working with St. Joe's University, and they have a couple classes of students who are going to sort of help the towns and do some. There's a marketing class, which I think will be great for communications, community engagement. We're going to try to have them put together some infographics to update the communities. Okay, I think we have time for a couple more questions. One that we got a bit ago is from Carol Boothroyd, and I think this is a really important question. She's asking to talk a little bit about what is involved in a feasibility study. I think that's something that's sort of thrown around a lot in the broadband world, but it's not always obvious what a feasibility study is. And I know a few of you mentioned that that's sort of a stage that you're in. So if one of our panelists wants to talk just a little bit about what that looks like and what a feasibility study is and why it's a potential step.
I'd be happy to. The feasibility study, when we started out our project, we were under the impression that we were going to create a utility right away, a utility district. And so we started to go to some of the towns to talk about it. And one of the first towns we went to said, well, why create this utility district if you don't even know how much it's going to cost you to do the whole project? So because we did some mapping, because we did the survey, because we found out a lot of information about our communities, we could come up with a straw man of what it would cost to put this together. But I don't think that the select boards of different towns are that ready to accept a group of people that came together's idea about what this is. They want a professional opinion. So the feasibility study will give us information about the technologies that we're looking into. So ISPs, the utility itself, fixed wireless internet through like a red zone and a Tirana technology. And it'll give us a better picture and a more professional picture of what that is. The feasibility study will also come up with build out numbers. This is what it's going to cost to build this out for your town if you go with fiber. And this is how it would play out. So it's a high level financial and engineering study that tells you a lot of information. The other thing it would do is help you understand what your sources of funding could be, because in any of these efforts, it's a fairly expensive process, and you have to come up with a stack of funds, and those funds come from different places. Maybe Connect Maine, maybe ARPA funds, maybe there are other federal funds coming in, and then there's a possibility if you're a utility district to issue revenue bonds and use the revenue stream of the utility district to pay those bonds down. So there's all this stuff that kind of comes together, and the feasibility study should pull that together, tie it up in a ribbon for us. And we have enough other information so we can question the feasibility study and say, well, wait a second, that doesn't seem right to us. We noticed that, when we did our work, we noticed this or we noticed that. And I might have mentioned that we talked about 4 potential things we wanted it's Axiom, or we wanted Axiom to do for us. We wanted them to take a look at if we established a regional municipal utility and what that would cost, fiber to the home, what it would cost fiber to the home if we were in a private-public partnership with an ISP where we owned maybe the basic lines going around the towns. We said, what will it cost us if the ISP does the whole thing? Because now the ISP may be throwing in, internet service provider may be throwing in funds and only requiring a little bit less money. And then we asked them to talk about the Tirana technology, which is non-line of sight Wi-Fi, fixed Wi-Fi, and how that might affect our towns, and whether because we are hilly and we are treed and we're dispersed, whether that technology would work for us or not. So we're going to get some answers, and the answers are based on professional opinions of people who have done this for a living.
So Robust actually kind of did it differently. We didn't really do a feasibility study per se. We had reached out to the 2 towns that kind of connect with us. Neither one at that time, and maybe not even now, wanted to work with us on this. So we knew we were going it alone. We had reached out to all the companies that provided internet in the town. So we already knew that they didn't want to increase their service in town. They didn't want to change how they were doing things. So we actually ended up just getting a grant, I think from Island Institute, for $10,000. Because once we had done research about would wireless work, would even the little wireless on the telephone poles and all this research, when we got the grant from Island Institute, we ended up actually just doing an engineer plan with the costs of the build out, because by that time we had already decided that it was going to be fiber. It was going to go down every single road in the town for people, we like if it's a private driveway and they don't take it during build out, then we don't have to put it down there, but we planned for it. So the town of Robust didn't do a feasibility study like the other people on this panel did. We kind of just did it as we were working through the process, ended up with the engineer plan is what we spent money on, and then took that to the town and based our grant and everything on that engineer plan.
And I guess I would just say that our feasibility planning, we arrived at the decision to put all of the data and information that we had interviewed providers into a formal RFP in collaboration with Mission Broadband in order to get responses from the ISPs that were going to be interested in the region, in working with the region. And the RFP was sent to 17 ISPs. There's not all of those were servicing, many of them were servicing little parts of the region already, but there were quite a number that weren't servicing. But Mission Broadband, based on knowing the ISPs and where they were potentially servicing other areas in Maine or the Northeast, had that list. And of those 17, we received 6 back. And all of them a little different. So what the process we've been doing, we still consider we're in feasibility planning, and we're about ready to, as I said, we're going to be re-engaging with the towns in order to bring them up to speed on the work that's been done, and to enter into the conversations that Bob was talking about, which is, A, do you want to stay involved in this process? B, and if so, what input and guidelines do you want to make sure are present in the ultimate regional design? And then we will dig in with that group of towns into the actual evaluation of the proposals, and the devil is in the detail on this, as everybody knows. I mean, it certainly is. And we have everybody from Certex, which is outside, which is servicing an ISP provider, which is not commonly known in Maine, I don't think, to Spectrum and Axiom and CCI and wireless pioneers in there, but really needs to provide some more complete information. I think the other issue for us, and I don't know how anybody has worked with this, but we are, within the region, there are some pretty significant RDOF areas. And so the towns actually, and a handful of the towns do have an option of potentially working on their own with CCI, who won a fair amount of those auctions. And the other provider in the order is SpaceX, which is expensive and unreliable in the middle of a hailstorm. So that's kind of where we're sitting feasibility study wise. The other part of it, though, that I want to add that Angela's going to be working on a lot more, and is really important about this, involves all about digital inclusion. And so in terms of affordability and access to equipment and training and some kind of access to free public high-speed internet service. So that's the other overlay on these designs. And the ISPs haven't been very creative about that in terms of their replies and responses. So that's a whole area that we're going to have to get pretty creative with them about.
Thanks, Sarah. All right. Wow. 2 hours goes by really fast.
So I would like to, before you close everything up, I want to squeeze in there that, and yet again, nice job, our panelists, because another segue right into something. So we are going to give everybody a 2-week break so you can kind of put into action some of the stuff you've learned. But when we reconvene on March the 17th, you get to meet your ISPs. Your internet service providers are coming to the party. So we have Spectrum is coming, Consolidated, Pioneer, Axiom. I can't remember the ones that we've heard back from, but that's kind of an overview of some of the ones that are going to be here so they can answer your questions about what their plans are for your community, if any. And so I will hand it back to Clara now.
Is that going to be like an all-day meeting, Elaine?
No.
I'm just saying.
I don't think so. No, it's not going to be. So, but they will be here at any rate. They plan on coming, so we'll see.
All right. Well, I just wanted to give a big thank you to Lisa, Jamie, Bob, and Sarah for joining us today, sharing such incredible information. And thank you to everyone else for attending and asking really, really great questions. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot. And I believe that this will be posted on Sunrise County Economic Council website shortly so that you guys can all watch it.
Awesome. Thank you all so
Thanks for
very
having
much for attending. And thank you again to a huge thank you to our panelists. Absolutely. Thank you so very much.
You guys.
See you
Have
on
a
the
good
17th.
weekend.